Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Nolan, and I'm the Managing Director of the UNDP Financial Centres for Sustainability. And I also have the honour this year of chairing Ireland's 5th Climate Finance Week, an output of the Ireland for Finance Department of Finance strategy. In studio, I'm delighted to have Minister Simon Harris, who we're going to go to in a moment, and discuss his support for the launch of the International Sustainable Finance Centre of Excellence today. But before we go to the Minister, I just want to take a moment and recognise that here today as part of Climate Finance Week 2022, we're again back in AIB and in the studio live from Molesworth Street. And I just need to take a moment and thank Colin and his team and Sarah, Yvonne and Anne and colleagues and Mary, of course, for supporting Climate Finance Week again and for bringing Climate Finance Week back to you all this year, again at the quality we've become used to. So thank you, Colin, and thank you to colleagues in AIB. As I noted, the 5th Climate Finance Week, we have over 6,000 people registered to attend this series of events this week. We've got over 30 events and nearly 100 speakers, which is a fantastic build from last year. And congratulations to my colleague, Catherine Daly, for pulling off a fantastic programme again. Where we are focused in the next hour is we're focused on the Ireland for Finance strategy. And within that, with SkillNet Ireland's support last year, the development of Ireland's first National Sustainable Finance Roadmap. And within that roadmap, which crossed 5 pillars, talent development, industry readiness, leveraging digital, enabling environment and promotion of communications, there's 18 actions. And action 1 is the launch and the establishment of an International Sustainable Finance Centre of Excellence here in Ireland, here in Dublin, but with an international reach. And I'm thrilled that we're going to take the next hour to softly launch the centre as we build towards its formal launch in January 2023. As noted, I'm joined by Minister Simon Harris. Minister, it's absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for taking time with us. And Minister, you know, as I said to you earlier on when we were waiting, a lot of this is your fault in the most positive way. I can remember a few years ago when you were the Minister in the Department of Finance, over, I think it was called the IFS strategy then, you had an event down in the centre in the Docklands, and you were good enough to include in that document a mention of green finance, and that Ireland should be doing something in that space. And I think, Minister, what's very telling there is going back to that and where we are today and the professionalism of today and the 6,000 people listening in today is how far we've come with the green and sustainable finance agenda. And that spark that you put in that policy document a few years ago is now leading to the establishment of today's centre. So if I may, Minister, just jump into it. The idea for the centre came from a SkillNet Ireland supported piece of research, which then obviously with the Department of Finance led to the development of Ireland's first National Sustainable Finance Roadmap. And from my perspective, and that really was a trigger to allow us to get to the point where we're launching today. This investment in research and talent to drive innovation is really a key focus of your department, Minister. And do you think within that, and within the climate agenda that you sitting around the table at Cabinet are discussing, do you think that the centre will help position Ireland as a global centre for sustainable finance and in doing so create new employment and job opportunities here in Ireland?
Quite simply it will, Stephen, and thank you so much for having me here today. And I want to thank everyone who's gotten us to this point. I want to thank all of the organisations, including SkillNet Ireland, Sustainable Finance Ireland, and so many others who've worked towards getting to this point. I want to thank the UNDP as well. This is a country that has a really proud record when it comes to financial services. We have a really proud record of being a home for international financial services. But what we knew back at the meeting in Accenture and what we know here today is we can never afford to be complacent. We can never afford to rest on our laurels. And really what I want the world to know, what I want anyone thinking of investing in Ireland to know is that we are deadly serious about developing the talent pool that we need to service the industry today and into the future. And a big part of that is going to have to be around the whole area of climate finance, sustainable financing. And it's not good enough just to wish it was a certain way. You actually have to invest. You actually have to put the funding in. You have to develop centres like this to make sure you can equip the industry and equip people working in the industry. That's what we're doing today. And I think this is going to have a massively positive influence on the industry in Ireland now and into the future.
And Minister, building on that, and I said again, as a senior minister sitting around the Cabinet table, discussing major issues and obviously having led during COVID, we've seen crisis after crisis the last number of years, obviously now Ukraine, but also in terms of the climate crisis. And you know, it's getting more and more stark from flooding, tornadoes, whatever it may be, and the cost of those damages. But bring it back to Ireland and the centre leading on research and, as you said, the leading on the talent piece. Do you see the centre as an important part of Ireland's response to facilitating our transition to a net zero economy?
I do. I mean, this country is really serious about getting to where we need to get to when it comes to climate targets, about playing our role both at a national level, at an EU level and at a global level. But it's not just enough to say we want to make it a certain way. And that's where the talent piece comes in. That's where we can proudly sit here on Molesworth Street in Dublin today and say this is the first country in the world to have a diploma in terms of compliance in sustainable finance. So that's not government rhetoric, it's not political promises, it's concrete action that's been taken, supported by government, to make sure that people working in the industry here have access to the resources and the training that they require now into the future. It's why when we had a budget only a couple of weeks ago, we've decided to invest more than €1 million now in Sustainable Finance Ireland, the industry arm of SkillNet Ireland, to resource that to provide training to more than 100 additional businesses over the course of 2023, 300 additional training places. So if your target's over here and you've got to get there, but to get there you've got to take concrete actions and steps. And a big part of that has to be about empowering our workforce, empowering our industry to make the changes and to seize the opportunities. We talk about the downsides to so many major issues, and climate is the most existential crisis we face. But there are also opportunities for countries that are willing to face the reality, take actions, and harness the potential for what the economy of the future looks like.
And that's really important, Minister. And I'm going to, at the risk of embarrassing Paul Healy and the SkillNet Ireland team, you know, one of the reasons why we're here today to be able to launch the centre has been the support of SkillNet Ireland. And earlier on this year, we had some colleagues over from the UN, and they also provide the secretariat to the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. And Marcus Netto will join us later on virtually from South Africa. But he did point out, and I remember he said at the time, that the SkillNet Ireland supported Sustainable Finance SkillNet is an exemplar, global exemplar of a non-financial policy lever to support net transition agenda. And I know he brought that message back to the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. So that's a fantastic takeaway. You said, you mentioned the diploma, but globally, we're one of the few jurisdictions that actually has a dedicated platform to invest in sustainable finance through SkillNet Ireland.
Absolutely, and I'm so proud of the work of Paul Healy and the team in SkillNet Ireland. We have a very can-do attitude here in this country. I hope people doing business here in this country know that. I hope people considering doing business in this country hear that. We have set up a dedicated department. I'm honoured to head it currently. It's a Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. It's a long title, but it's a very simple purpose and mission, and that is to make sure we have the skills and talents that we need in the country for the jobs of today and into the future. And it means supporting agencies like SkillNet Ireland to reach into business and say, how can we help you? It's a two-way street. It's not about government talking at industry. It's about government and industry coming together and saying, how can we help? How can we work together on these challenges? And I think you're seeing practical examples. Well, of course you're seeing it. We're sitting here in what is going to be the new centre that we're launching today, proudly saying Ireland now has a centre of excellence for international sustainable finance. That's that partnership approach that we really value here in this country and want to do more of.
And again, Minister, going back to when you were Minister of State in the Department of Finance and the IFS strategy, you really brought that public-private element into the strategy. And I think, again, building on that over the last few years, as you said, we're now seeing X hundred firms go through the Sustainable Finance SkillNet and supported by it. And then obviously last year when the first Irish National Sustainable Finance Roadmap was developed, over 50 private sector entities were involved in the development of that. So, Minister, I'm just conscious of your time, and as we move and we talk about the net zero element, where do you see the future for Ireland? We've got COP27 coming up in a few weeks. Which is obviously a very important climate change talks in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. And where do you see the next steps for Ireland on our net zero agenda? Again, linked back to the centre and the portfolio you're over, please, Minister.
So we have an opportunity to be a global leader when it comes to sustainable finance. I mean, that is our ambition as a country, to become a global leader, just like we've been a global leader in many, many other areas of financial services, to attract the best and the brightest to work here in this area, and to recognise, and there is the hard reality of this, to recognise that there are legal requirements, compliance requirements, regulatory requirements on companies, and more probably to come. We need to make sure that we're not just tut-tutting about it, that people aren't just worried about it, that actually they're ready to embrace it, that they're ready to harness the potential that arises from it. The climate crisis that our world faces is so severe, and the COP talks are going to be so important, but for industry, for financial services, there's an opportunity here in Ireland to try and get ourselves into good shape, to try and be world leaders in relation to this, and to invest in supporting people working in the industries, provide them with the tools so that compliance and regulation and the likes doesn't worry them, but actually becomes something that they're equipped to deal with. And I think that is where we want to be. So Ireland's ambition here, let me be very clear, is to be a global leader when it comes to sustainable financing.
And I think, Minister, if I can build on that, if you don't mind, I think the key thing, because you mentioned the regulatory and policy framework, it is what it is. And it's evolving rapidly, and the Central Bank of Ireland and the Department of Finance are obviously involved in that. you're right, the companies, and this is why the compliance postgrad is so important, we need to start there and ensure that within the risk framework that Irish professionals are upskilled. But I think what you're also saying is impact. As you move through that, it's developing new products and services that can be developed here in Ireland and perhaps exported around the world, like we do very successfully in other things. And I think the centre can be at the heart of that. So, Minister, if I may, just looking out into the next year, and with your support, what would be the final question I made, the ambition you have for the centre in terms of what you'd like to see happen over the next 12 months, if you don't mind, Minister?
So that we really try and accelerate some of the good practice that's already in place, the long-standing partnership that exists between governments through SkillNet Ireland and industry, that we look for opportunities to further collaborate, that we significantly increase and ramp up the level of training and support being provided to people working in industry, and that we embrace the fact that we are sitting here in Dublin, in Ireland, in a country that has one of the most highly educated workforces in the world, one of the highest progression rates to higher education in Europe. And we say that is a massive national resource. And if we can couple that now with programs, with training to embrace the opportunities and challenges that arise from climate, we'll be in a really good place in terms of being a key location for sustainable finance now and into the future.
Well, I'll tell you what, Minister, I was already excited about the centre, so you're after leaving me more excited. I really want to thank you for your support in terms of, as you mentioned, €1 million there has been put towards upskilling and sustainable finance. The centre is going to drive in that programme. We've already embarrassed Paul Healy enough, but within Skill in Ireland, I think it's a super job that's happening there. But also going back to the framework within the Ireland for Finance strategy, and as you kicked that off several years ago, so in a very positive way, as I said at the beginning, there's a reason why we're here today, and you've been part of that journey. You may not have realised it the last few years.
I get blamed for lots of things.
No, this is a good thing. So thank you very much, Minister, for your time today. And I said we look forward to working with your department as you build out the centre over the next 12 months.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Stephen.
So that was the session with the Minister there now, and thanks very much to Minister Harris for supporting the establishment of the centre. The next piece before we get into our panel is something I'm very excited about as well, and it's the presentation of the annual Climate Finance Week Sustainable Finance Leadership Award. And with me in studio today, I've got the bold Sean Kidney. Sean, it's absolutely terrific to have you here in Dublin. Thank you for coming in late last night. And I know you have to head off to DC for an IMF meeting in a few hours. So we really appreciate you coming across today. And for those who don't know Sean, let me just give a recap, if I may, and I won't do justice, Sean, of the CV. But Sean is the co-founder and CEO of the Climate Bonds Initiative. And Sean, I'll ask you in a moment to tell us a little bit more about CBI, which is an international NGO working to mobilise global capital for climate action. And I'm, as I said, thrilled to have Sean here with me in the studio. Currently, Sean is a member of the French government's Green Sovereign Bond Evaluation Council, and he's also a member of the Singapore Monetary Authority Singapore expert group on this topic. And then he's also a member of the EU's Platform on Sustainable Finance. Previously, Sean was a member of the EU's Technical Expert Group on Sustainable Finance, TEG, and he's formerly a member of the People's Bank, a member of the Advisory Committee to the People's Bank of China Green Finance Task Force. Between 2017 to 2019, he was voted Global Capital Magazine's most influential champion in the sustainable finance market. And as I said, as part of Climate Finance Week 2022, we're delighted to have this beautiful award to present to you today, Sean, in recognition of your leadership efforts over the last decade or plus in the whole area of sustainable finance. So Sean, we want to do a little bit about who you are and how you've got to this point, but perhaps you can tell the audience a little bit about Climate Bonds Initiative, where it is today, and then how you got into the space.
Well, let me say something first. Hey, I'm very proud to get this award as an Irish citizen and as a European citizen, not because of what I've done, because of what we've done. Because over the last 10 years, we have turned around the whole idea of investment in climate solutions from being a cost and a burden to an opportunity, as the Minister said a minute ago. And that's the essence of what we need to understand here. The challenge we face is enormous. Like, this is existential, folks. But if we make the change and make the investments that are required globally, some $9.2 trillion a year, according to McKinsey's, this is actually a Keynesian stimulus on steroids. And this is a business opportunity for the likes of Ireland as financial centre, and also for Europe, which is way ahead of many parts of the world in terms of understanding what a sustainable city is and a sustainable economy is. So I want to say this is a group effort. So whilst I appreciate getting the award, it's very much something that I would like to accept on behalf of everyone, including you, Stephen, who've been a champion in Ireland and setting up this new centre. I'm so excited the new centre is being set up. So that's the background, folks. But look, Climate Bonds is an NGO mobilising capital around the world. We're about the green bond market, which is about $2 trillion outstanding. When I first came to Ireland, it was $3 billion outstanding.
Yeah.
So that's the scale of growth. And it's continuing to grow. Social bonds, sustainable bonds, blue resilience are all part of this particular market. And also government action and central bank action. I'm very proud of the work we've done at the Network for the Greening of the Financial System, 100 central banks around the world, as you know, and the leadership of European central banks. Originally, Banque de France and the Dutch Central Bank kicked this off in shifting our understanding of what we've got to do to ensure financial stability in the context of climate change, and understanding the importance of proactive steps to change the world to make sure it's clean, green and sustainable. So, you know, we work with governments around the world. That's enough to say. And we work with folks like you.
Yeah.
And I also want to say we work with professionals around the world, because one of the things about making a big change when we're shifting the global supertanker here is that we do need that skills agenda.
Yes.
We do need to train people up. And so I'm really thrilled to hear the news about the training, the professional development programs that you're doing in Ireland to not only support the shift in the planet we've got to shift, but also to support Ireland to grasp the opportunities of this tsunami of change coming through.
And thanks for that, Sean. And I think we've spoken before about the talent agenda, and again, it was great to hear the Minister. You know, I asked the Minister a question there, Sean, about the centre and his ambition and his hope for the centre. You know, you're a very important market actor, market player in this space. Ireland, as you know, is the fourth largest financial services centre in Europe, also has a global reach. Where do you think the centre can play its part? Because it is a crowded market right now in the whole area of sustainable finance in the last number of years. Where can the centre play its role, not just in talent, but maybe in research? And you were here in 2019, you did a news article and you spoke about Ireland being an island for innovation and product development. Where do you see that going, Sean, please?
You know, a friend of mine, Sean Kingsbury, who used to be the head of the UK Green Investment Bank, who I met last time I was here in Dublin, talks about how at the Green Investment Bank, they weren't taking extra risk. They were better understanding what needed to be done, so they took much more informed risk.
Yes.
And they still made a profit. Now, as we look at the changes that have to be done to change the world, we need a deeper, richer understanding of what's got to be done and a richer understanding of what the real risks are. And that way we can be much more effective in being a financial centre, in being transaction agents, in being investors. Now, as we train people up, what we're doing is essentially training people who can have a deeper understanding of the risk issues and therefore the opportunities issues. So I'm going to say the key thing we've got to do in Ireland, in Dublin, is to be able to develop a cohort of people who are going to understand what the changes coming through are, going to understand more deeply how they work and better understand the nature of the opportunities. Because look, we're moving into a world of drastic change. There is a tsunami coming through, if only because every major economy has now committed to 2030 climate reduction targets as well as 2050. It's going to be, while there is no precedent for this in history, we've never seen this scale of investment coming through. It's if you can figure out how to surf the wave, there's money to be made. But you could be swamped by the wave. Now, that's all about understanding what to do, right?
Yeah.
That's your skills basis.
No, it is, and it's one of the reasons why, in terms of Skill at Ireland and support for the centre, and then obviously Paul Ryan, the guys in the Department of Finance, focus on this. Sean, just before you have to go and get the plane straight to DC from Dublin, which I think is super. Final question is, as I said, 2019, last time you were here, and we launched the $1.5 billion bond with the World Bank. You had a call for action then as well. Ireland need to do the kind of the centre piece. When we look out to the future as Ireland, but emerging markets. So a lot of what we talk about now in this space is Ireland within the EU, but Ireland opportunity within the emerging markets and our opportunity to support, just maybe through our development programme, through climate finance. Where do you see a role for Ireland within that, please?
70% of the capex we've got to invest in the next 30 years is in emerging markets. It's not in the rich world. Yeah. There's plenty of business in the rich world, but if you look at the forward growth business as a result of that capital investment, well, there's a lot to be done, and they need expertise, and they need transactions, because the capital happens to sit in the rich world. This movement of capital between the rich world and the developing world, is critical for a range of reasons. It's critical because of the climate challenge that we face. It's also critical because of the demographic challenge we face. In Germany, in Ireland, in France, we are not going to solve the world by keeping our capital to ourselves. And we're not going to solve the challenges we face, like immigration from Africa, for example, by keeping capital to ourselves. We're going to make money by investing in Nigeria, by investing in Kenya, by investing in Brazil, by investing in Indonesia, and making sure they go green as part of that problem. That's expertise, that's talent, which is here, not just in the financial sector, but in the engineering sector, in the building sector, in the industrial sector, and so on. We need to take that. Now, I have this conversation in small economies that are nimble in many parts of the world. There is a partnership to be had between Ireland, between Singapore, between Denmark, between Luxembourg, to be the nimble champions of the change and to make money, basically, by pioneering this change and to show the bigger, I'm going to say the slower giants, what to do and how to make this transition. This is an opportunity. Ireland needs to be a laboratory for the changes that are being made, is beginning to be so,
yes.
And then it needs to see its role as triggering, inspiring and supporting change all around the world. That's the business opportunity. 70% of capital investment in emerging markets. Just think of that prize, if we can grab it.
Great. So look, Sean, I think that for me is the first takeaway from Climate Finance Week, the nimble champions of change, and that Ireland should play a role in that. Sean, thank you very much for your acceptance of this year's award. And then all the work that you do. I wouldn't lift it up because it's
beautiful.
May fall off. But look, Sean, I know you need to go get your flight, so thank you very much and safe travel to your IMF meeting in DC. Thank you, Sean, for being with us today.
Thank you, Stephen.
So we're going to get stuck into our panel now. We have Marcos Neto, Director of the Sustainable Finance Hub from the UNDP. Marcos, you're live from South Africa. Great to see you, sir. We also have Kirsten Dunlop, who's live from Italy, who is the CEO of EIT Climate Kick. I'm delighted to have you both with us today. We also have in the studio, and we'll come back to the studio in a moment, we've got Imelda Hurley, who's the CEO of Quilcha. We also have Dr. Paul Ryan, who's a director in the Department of Finance. And then we've got Dr. Colin Hunt, who is the CEO of AIB, Ireland's largest bank. And it's great to have you all here today. And I'll just check the clock because I know we're going to be going down to the stock exchange in 30 odd minutes. So as I said, we've got a truly global panel today. Here in Dublin, Imelda, Colin and Paul. In South Africa, we have Marcos. And in Italy, we have Kirsten. Marcos, may I start with you, please, sir? You were good enough to come to Ireland on May the 6th, actually in this room, and you spoke to the collective who developed Ireland's first Sustainable Finance Roadmap, which the UNDP supported. Marcos, you also provide the Secretary to the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. Can you just give us a sense from an international perspective where the whole sustainable finance agenda is right now today and where you hope to see it go, or not where you hope to see it, where perhaps it goes next year on the Indian presidency of the G20? I didn't want to get you in trouble there. So over to you, Marcos.
Thank you, Stephen. I hope you can hear me well. It's great to see Paul and Sean and the minister before and everybody. Let me congratulate you all for launching the center. It's a great achievement into the roadmap. And not being with you and the internet seems frozen up here.
Don't worry about it. We can still hear you. We can still hear you, Marcos.
Good. I'm about 45 minutes away from doing this in the SDG Finance Academy. We are training about 100 people, which is skills which I'm back to in a moment. In answer to your question, I think we are in a critical moment on the sustainable finance agenda. On the positive side, we see massive amount of development, both from the market point of view. John just mentioned the size of the green bond market, the interest of financial institutions around the world with things like net zero commitments and elements like this. We are also seeing a growing realization leadership and on the government side, on regulatory, with Europe, I think, being at the forefront, but also China, developing economies, the G20 itself, which last year endorsed a G20 5 years-long sustainable finance roadmap. And this year, we just had a chair summary of the last finance ministers and central bank governors meeting. They have endorsed a transition finance framework that we work in the Sustainable Finance Working Group, as well as a series of recommendations on access and affordability by SMEs and by developing economies to sustainable finance, as well as a set of recommendations to strengthen the credibility, the integrity of financial institution pledges to net zero. Which then brings me to the second issue, which is this is the positive side. But we are also facing a risk, right? We've seen a growing discontent, if you want, and pushback for different reasons, right? By regulators around the world, either because like the ESG, the sustainable finance agenda, they don't want that, or because they think there's a lot of wash or ST wash or that. But we have two different set of pressures going into this agenda. So for me, we had a moment that there is enough momentum, there's also enough resistance coming back now. I think it's going to be very important for the G20, for governments, for financial institutions to tie that up. What do we mean by sustainable finance? How do we know that impact is happening? And that needs regulation. I think it is going to be important for governments to start smart regulation, not over-regulate, but to start to put the level playing field in the regulatory framework. So financial institutions can withstand some of the pressures they are receiving from those that don't want them, either sustainability or ESG investment, or for those that says you are not doing enough. You are basically, enabling wash and old wine in new bottles. So what happens in the next few months becomes very, very important. Now, the Indian presidency is aware of that. One important point, and I'll stop here, maybe we have another chance to go into more details. One of the priorities that the Indian president wants to do is actually to look at capacity building. Because one of the things we realized this year, that one of the biggest bottleneck from the to access sustainable finance is capacity, is the lack of capacity. So the agenda of capacity building that Ireland is with the SkillNet and others, it is becoming an important pillar of the global agenda.
Okay. Marcos, thank you very, very much for that. I'm conscious your line isn't that great. Now, I was able to hear you, but you're moving around like a little robot. So we'll may or may not come back to you. We'll see how the line comes in the following minutes. And I know, Kirsten, you also have an issue, so we'll try you in a few minutes. But my takeaways from Marcos there was net zero credibility, growing discontent by regulators in what they may be perceiving as some firms pushing on. It's greenwashing, perhaps. And then obviously the talent agenda, which the Minister spoke to and Sean spoke to very well, and this is where Ireland is putting a big play on. And that brings me nicely onto you, Paul, Dr. Paul Ryan, Director, Department of Finance, who's over sustainable finance, looks after sustainable finance in Ireland, looks after the Irish sustainable finance agenda within the EU, and then with the multilateral development banks. And you're just back from DC, from the IMF World Bank meetings last week, Paul. Paul, can you give us a sense of what you heard and the message around climate finance last week in DC, and then why under the Ireland for Finance strategy, the Irish Sustainable Finance Roadmap is so important and what it's achieved the last 12 months, please?
Okay, Stephen, thank you. And look, delighted to be here. And Colin, thank you very much for hosting us again in this wonderful building. I suppose the key thing, Stephen, is a bit like what the Minister said, and Sean as well articulated by Marcus, that, there's huge needs here, huge needs for investments, both in the developed world and developing world. And apparently an awful lot of money there, but there's a shortage of projects there to identify them in the first place. But the key thing to do, it's almost like a vital sort of blood in the system, is again to have the skills and the talent there. And that was the message coming across all the time. The other message from the IMF and World Bank meetings was, clearly we have an energy security problem at the moment with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but this should just basically accelerate the transition to net zero. And it should be done. It's not clear how it will be done, but it provides an opportunity. And I think the key thing where we're placed here, and you and I have worked for a long time in this, and on the financial services strategies, the sustainable finance roadmap, and then Minister Donoghue launched her international climate finance strategy last week in Washington. And the key thing there was basically, skills and talent development, and that brings us back to the UNDP Centre, which again we're very grateful for the UN. I think it's a great opportunity, and I think this places us in a very good position. Number one, both within Ireland to help develop Irish people in terms of that, and that's why the courses with SkillNets are very important to make sure financial services in Ireland that the people are skilled up. Secondly, then it allows us then to work with other countries in the EU, North America, etc., to work on this agenda. And then lastly, then I suppose the big one then for the Paris alignment is to work with the developing world as well. One of the meetings I represented the minister at was the Finance Ministers' Climate Coalition, and you're involved in some of the work on that, Stephen, and again some of the people on the call here. But again, this is basically peer reviews, rich countries working with poorer countries to help them meet the Paris alignment. And again, skills and talent development are the big ones there. There's plenty of money, plenty of projects, but it's basically getting the key people in place there. And I think we're well positioned for that. I think the Sustainable Finance Roadmap is very useful there again. It focuses minds, and I think we have very good skills here. We are nimble and flexible. Like Sean said, it worked very well in financial services over recent years. An idea comes up, we can change tack very, very quickly and then work with that. And I think we should simply continue to do that. It's done on a public-private partnership. It's worked very well over recent years. And, the roadmap sets out the future, sort of for us, what it is, what the challenges are, and basically how to meet that. So I think we're in a very good position there.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Imelda, if I can turn to you, CEO of Quilter, and congratulations, I believe recently the president of IBEC. And you had your big jamboree a few weeks ago, so congratulations. Imelda, you as a company, I think it's in around 7% of the land mass of our country, which is just mind-blowing when one thinks about it in terms of what you look after as a company. But with all the challenges that companies are now facing, from inflation, supply chain, and market downturn, how relevant is climate action within that today, please, Imelda?
Yeah. I couldn't overstate the importance of climate action, and you can take it that we as an organisation are facing the same challenges as so many others. I stand back and think about the environment being really relentlessly challenging. When we think about it, we've had Brexit, we've had the pandemic. I note I use the word had, let's hope. The war in the Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, the energy challenges. But the reality for us is they are all urgent matters that are being dealt with on an urgent basis. But climate action and the need to find solutions to the challenges of our time, it's incredibly important. It really does play to the enduring nature of our planet, so I cannot overstate how important it is, and it does need to be dealt with the same type of urgency as the other urgent issues I've mentioned.
And Melda, within that, because I know, I'm working with your colleagues, and Paulina and David, who are just absolutely excellent, but I don't need to tell you that, but they're absolutely fantastic and really enjoyable to work with as well. You launched a new strategy earlier on this year. A big part that was TCFD. To use a firm that worked very hard on that, and again, going back to the Sustainable Finance SkillNet programme that's supported. Very quickly, what's involved in that strategy? And that's a strategy that had to be approved by the board, right?
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back and talk about 2020 for a moment and say we spent about 2 years working on that vision and strategy that we ultimately launched. And we went right back to the essence of our organisation. So we manage 7% of the land of Ireland, and we asked ourselves, what exactly is our purpose? Now, that's a very straightforward question, and the answer is very straightforward, but the journey to go from A to B and be really clear on it did take some time, and it is to manage the state forests on behalf of the people of Ireland. And if you take that as our purpose, we then looked to map all of the values that forests deliver to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We summarised them into 4 key areas, ultimately. Forests that deliver for wood, for nature, for climate, and for people. And we call those the multiple benefits of forestry. So when we launched earlier this year, this new forestry vision as such, that was to ensure that Quilter optimised our contribution to Ireland's climate action targets. And it sees us work through the 4 areas, the multiple benefits of forestry. And just in very brief, if I start with forests for climate, huge focus on afforestation. So Quilter is targeting to create or enable the creation of 100,000 hectares of new forests between now and 2050, and that will sink an additional 18 million tonnes of CO2. But it's not all about afforestation, it's also about the forests that we have. So we looked and modelled under carbon models what more can we do with the existing state forests to capture more carbon. And we have figured out how to capture an additional 10 million tonnes of carbon between now and 2050. So that's a second really important action. A third, in terms of climate, is the whole area of peatland forests that can emit carbon. So we are targeting to redesign 30,000 hectares of our peatland forests with nature and biodiversity really as the primary objectives going forward. And the final objective in terms of climate is very much around the space of the need for renewable energy. So in conjunction with our joint venture partner, ESB, we'll deliver a gigawatt of wind energy, or at least that's the target, between now and 2030. I'm going to speak very briefly, albeit I've spoken all about climate. I think it's important to just briefly address the other areas. In terms of biodiversity, and we've heard more and more about the crisis that is now upon us in terms of biodiversity, a little known fact is that 20% of Quilta is today managed with nature and biodiversity as its primary objective. And we have now set on a path to increase that to 30% in the near term, and indeed half of our estate in the long term. And that's a combination of many different things that we will do. In terms of delivering for wood, and I'll be very brief at this point, despite all of what we're going to do, we are going to continue to ensure that we deliver the same amount of wood as we always have to support the delivery of sustainable homes in Ireland. And we're going to promote wood as a sustainable building material, timber frame homes, etc. And just finally, in terms of forests for people, because it does come back to people as well and the sustainability of the planet, we are targeting to enable 100 million of investment spend in the delivery of world-class visitor destinations on the Quilta estate. And that'll be public-private partnerships, great example. We're also going to double the number of recreation forests we have across the country to support people's health and well-being. So we'll go from 260, we'll double it to broadly 500. And finally, last point, this strategy or such your vision will enable the creation of 1,200 jobs, really rural jobs throughout the length and breadth of Ireland, supporting the just transition.
I was actually going to say that, the just transition. A lot of what you're talking about there is a just transition. So we're seeing the climate agenda, we're seeing now the biodiversity agenda, and the just transition. And I feel personally that in the next few years, those three will actually come together. And hopefully we can stop in the sense of focus on the one key thing. But I suppose, Colin, if I can pivot to you now, and again, thank you very much for being here with us, sir, and thank you again for the use of your building. But what I've just heard from Imelda there is financing, gigawatt of energy and so on and so forth. And we obviously have a fantastic team here led by Paul Travers on that whole space, and AIB is just doing a remarkable work there. But Colin, if I can, a year off from last year's Climate Finance Week, and you were good enough to launch the strategy with us, I want to move to the centre in a moment, but just where has AIB the last 12 months? It's been quite a remarkable journey building on already the building blocks you had in place.
I suppose it goes back longer than the last 12 months. Sure. We've been sort of significantly increasing our exposure to green lending from effectively a standing start 6 years ago. And it's now a pivotal part of our strategy. It's a massive opportunity. Yeah. And we have, over the course of the past 4 or 5 years, we have lent about 6 billion in this space, generally. And we're very excited by the opportunities that lie ahead. From a standing start, again, we've built a great centre of excellence internally within AIB in terms of people who are expert in the science and of lending in a renewable way. And I'm really, really optimistic about the sort of impact that team can have on the entirety of the business and our customer base over the years ahead. It's an extraordinary opportunity, an opportunity that really excites me but terrifies me at the same time.
Okay.
And it terrifies me because, back to what Paul was saying, there's no shortage of capital. Mm-hmm. There really isn't. It's a fantastic position for us and indeed the broader banking industry to be in. Unlike going into the last crisis, we're absolutely in a really, really strong capital position. We have the skills, but are we going to have the opportunities? Mm-hmm. Are the projects going to come fast enough? Like, having the skills and having the capital, having the talent, having the money are necessary conditions, preconditions for success, but they're not sufficient. We need to have the projects. And I am really concerned that we're not seeing those projects actually manifesting themselves early enough. You and I sat here 12 months ago and we were talking about the illusion of 2030 being a long way away from us. In terms of infrastructure development, it's tomorrow.
Yes.
It is next week. It is on top of us. And we've got to stop drinking the Kool-Aid and talking about how wonderful everything is and how we're all sort of becoming so committed to the sustainability agenda. We've got to see the projects.
Yes. So very much what Sean was saying as well.
Yeah.
2030 isn't that far away.
No, it's not. It's next week.
Yep. And within that then, so let's cut through, as you said, use my own words, there's a lot of noise around this topic right now. We're seeing in the last number of weeks, one of the biggest global initiatives, there's questions around some of the entities that signed up to it that didn't realize what they were actually signing up to per se around the net zero agenda. I know you, in terms of what you're doing here as an entity, firmly in your sights, and you have the right people in place to achieve that. If we then pivot to the Centre of Excellence, if I may, for a moment, Colin, and that you've been good enough to support us establishing it under Action 1 of the Ireland for Finance, in the vein of what you just said there, where do you see a role for the centre and maybe turbocharging some of the activities you talked about there, please, Colin?
Well, this is the biggest opportunity in the history. Well, it's the biggest challenge in the history of the world, I think. Far, far bigger than anything we've ever faced before as a global community. But it's also, for my industry, the banking industry, it is the biggest single opportunity that I've ever seen. We're talking about a capital deficit running to multiple trillions globally. It is extraordinary in terms of the scale of the opportunity. And this is an opportunity for the banking industry to actually do real good in the world and to put capital to work in a way that is very socially conscious, environmentally conscious, really sustainable, and low risk. So it is, as an asset class, standing aside from the environmental benefits and being purely commercial about it, it is a massive, massive opportunity for us. But we need, and for the industry, not just here in Ireland, not just for AIB, but for the industry.
Yes.
And you're going to need a massive collaborative approach right the way across the industry to actually deliver on the opportunity. That requires people, it requires skills. And through this, we've been talking about this for a long time. In this country, we've demonstrated in the past what a small, I can remember when I was in college and when I was learning economics, there was a general view that sort of Ireland could never be successful economically because it was a small island nation on the periphery of Europe. And we have proven by building centres of excellence in certain sectors that we can be an economic dynamo, as we have been over the course of the past number of decades. So you build the skills, you have the capital. We've got a massive opportunity for Ireland to be a really have a pivotal role in the greening of the world.
I can see within that the centre having a key role. And again, she's not here, I don't want to embarrass her, but Yvonne Holmes, who is one of your team here, one of your senior team, obviously chairs the Skillnet Support and Sustainable Finance Skillnet. And under her leadership, we have gone over the last 2 years, so over 2,500 Irish located finance professionals have gone through some form of upskilling in the sustainable finance. And then later on this week, under her leadership again, launched the first postgraduate diploma in sustainable finance for compliance of professionals globally. And I think that's a key point. I'm going to pivot now to Kirsten, who's in Italy. Kirsten, I hope you're still with us. There you are. Thank you, Kirsten. So, Kirsten, if I may, CEO of the EU EIT Climate Kick, but bigger than the EU now, working in 39 countries around the world. And I believe also part of your programs are supported by Irish Aid in Africa, which is super here that we're in Ireland to hear that. You know, one of the big programs that you're running with now, Kirsten, is a program with 112 cities in Europe that need to be decarbonised by 2030. And actually just building on the point that Colin said, because I was excited later on, now I'm back to being terrified, but in a right point, the time frame is very short. So how are you planning to make that happen, Kirsten? And within that, the role of finance, please.
Well, I think this is exactly the point about market making and market building. And I was listening to across this whole conversation, this twin relationship between the world's greatest challenge and massive opportunities. So the program you're referring to is the European Mission on Sustainable and Smart Cities, which is 112 cities that have been selected into the program who are formally committing to go to net zero by 2030. And that is a hugely it's hugely challenging for them. It's enormously daunting in terms of the political commitment. But really, it's about an innovation-led transformation for which sustainable finance, and in fact, a huge paradigmatic shift of finance into restructuring and building markets in the economies of the future is absolutely central. So the timing of the Sustainable Centre for Finance, the Centre of Excellence, couldn't be possibly better. And if you think about it in a European context, Sean was referring to the fact that Europe is way ahead in terms of its understanding and framing of what a decarbonised future looks like. There's a degree of structural momentum in Europe around initiatives like the emissions, the Green Deal, the nested regulations that are coming in around mobility, infrastructure, transport, and so on. And if you start to bring into that the skill building, the frameworks, the tools, the templates, the mechanisms for a consolidated reworking and redesign of finance in behind that kind of market building, you create precedent, you create directional signal, you create the kind of market building, confidence building that very large order of capital needs, like the institutional investors and sovereign wealth funds looking for where to place long-term patient infrastructure capital. Hundreds of cities procuring together green steel, cement, re-qualification of urban infrastructure, rewilding, urban farming, smart materials, nature-based solutions. These are huge market building efforts for which we need appropriate finance, appropriate capital, the right skills to place and blend public and private instruments, and to really blend in everything from catalytic public money through to large-scale place-based investing, large-scale multi-asset class investing, and institutional finance and project finance coming along. So these kinds of frameworks are here. Europe is leading the way in doing this. It's creating a huge signal of change, and a centre of excellence that helps skill people up to bring the right kind of finance to the table. And indeed, I think we are indeed in the situation where we are building the projects. That's 7 years of effort to build up huge effort across multiple countries and jurisdictions. And so we need that finance to come to the table. We need the skills, we need the vision, and we need that marrying of context, market, place, people, and the frameworks to land this in time.
Thank you for that, Kirsten. And again, as always, thank you for EU EIT Climate Kick for being a founder of the centre and supporting it and its launch today. Climate Kick has been so good to the country of Ireland and the programmes you've supported over the last number of years. Marcos, we're about to go down to your next stock exchange in a moment, but just seeing you there in that very dark room, I want to come back to you because it looks like the Wi-Fi is a little bit better. Marcos, you spoke in terms of decarbonisation challenge, a net zero challenge, that greenwashing piece. It was a little bit at the end that broke up a little bit, if I may. So I want to come back to the Centre of Excellence because the UNDP Sustainable Finance Hub and the UNDP Financial Centres for Sustainability are also supporting the Centre Get Away today. What is your hope and ambition for the Centre over the next 12 months, please, Marcos?
I think there's two things. I think already the word. So from my point of view, what can we learn on the SkillsNet side of things, right? And how can we translate the SkillsNet's curriculum, all that you described today, to developing countries? Now, our SDG Finance Academy, for example, has trained government officials in Uruguay, and a very long list of governments asking. So how can we actually combine forces in that aspect? That is one important side. The second is showing that things can happen, showing that what you setting up in Ireland with the roadmap and the center can generate impact. That for me is extremely important because it will then allow other countries around the world and to follow on the path, have an inspiration. I think we are in a moment that people are feeling daunted by the challenge. So having stories, having like this 112 cities, having inspiration sites that show it can be done, it's extremely important. And perhaps just one last comment, Stephen, on the pipeline. One of the things we are doing, we've actually worked in 22 countries, 20 coming on, in designing a sector and subsector level, right? investment opportunity areas that are direct link to the Sustainable Development Goals and to NDC countries. So we are bringing an acceleration on the origination phase of an investment to the table in the developing world that should help with the pipeline challenge that we all know exists.
Great, thank you, Marcus. Paul, just before we go down to Euronext, I want to come back to you because you've heard a lot here today. I know, as I said, you've got the three things that I'm aware of. I know your portfolio is bigger than that. As you build towards COP27 in a few weeks, and obviously government will be going over, and I believe you're going over as well, how important is it? I know last year you went to Glasgow and you had some physical hard copies of the roadmap. You're now going to COP 12 months later with actually Action 1 delivered. How important is that for a government, please, Paul?
Well, I think it's absolutely critical, Stephen, the fact that, not only do we have a strategy and a plan, but we actually have implemented one of the key items on it. And we've implemented with the UNDP, very helpful to that, and then with the private sector then as well too. I also deal with the domestic agenda and climate action. It's also important to get the private sector involved there. I think it's a concrete example of the public sector working with the private sector, but also then that it's outward looking as well, Stephen. I think it's a key point. I cover all the multilateral development banks. I've mentioned the searches to them as well. They're all excited about that as well too. So I think it's a key thing to sell for Ireland, and to work for this COP, but then to work between the next COP and then COP in November 23 as well too. So I think, as I said, it's very good to show what we can do. Do we have a vision for the future, and then do we have a roadmap yet again, or a pathway for the future then as well? Absolutely critical.
Great, and I think what we've had here today in the panel, Imelda, you've shown us from a company perspective, a leading company in Ireland, what you're doing on your climate action plan, but it needs to be financed, it needs to be invested in.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a key one. Colin, you've also demonstrated to us that we have the skill sets here, almost that science of financing, as I think you called it. Now it's about that pipeline. And I think with some of the individuals, and we're having obviously a gala dinner tomorrow, it's amazing where some of those individuals that have been financed by the likes of AIB over the years and renewables are now operating globally. It's just phenomenal. And it's maybe a little bit of a secret within the Irish sector. These people are global actors and managing billions of international capital around the world. And as you said, it's about, perhaps they've had to go abroad because the pipeline wasn't big enough here in Ireland as part of that, but they've also taken that skill set and they brought it around the world in a very successful way. Is that right, Colin, or is it just, again, just that strength of the ecosystem here is allowing that to happen?
First of all, I don't think it's a peculiarity to Ireland that there isn't a sufficiently large pipeline.
Yeah, I understand.
I think that's something we can apply. It's a very large pipeline. It just isn't sufficiently well advanced. It needs to be advanced at a quicker pace. Globally, I would argue. But the outward orientation is, I think it's just innate in us.
Yes.
We're a country which is one of the most open in the world from a trade perspective. We earn our livings internationally. And I'm thrilled to see so many of the people who are actually doing the hard stuff in this industry in terms of delivering the projects. Yeah. I'm thrilled to see so many of them having a global rather than necessarily Irish impact. Because this is a crisis, as we know, that has no respect for borders.
So on that note, I'm going to go now, if we can, Rob, we're just going to go down to Euronext, where we're going to have a ringing of the bell to celebrate the soft launch of the Centre of Excellence. Are we able to go down, or do I want to stay with the panel for a little bit longer? Now, Minister Fleming, Darrell is there, and then Tracy from Skillet Ireland. So we can see you guys. I'm unsure, can you hear me, Minister?
Great. Good afternoon. I'm Darrell Burns, CEO of Euronext Dublin, and we're delighted to ring the bell to officially launch the International Sustainable Finance Centre of Excellence. Now,
thank you very much. Minister, go ahead, Darrell.
Over to Tracy Donnery from SkillNet.
Thank you. I'm Tracy Donnery from Skillet Ireland, and Skillet Ireland is delighted to be here today to formally again launch the International Centre for Sustainable Finance. And together with Sustainable Finance Ireland, we really believe this will make a huge difference to enabling Ireland to be a global leader in sustainable finance by building capability, knowledge and skills. And thank you very much. I'd like to thank and welcome Minister Fleming, who has joined us here today, and thank you very much for being here. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Minister Fleming. Thank you, Darrell, and thank you, Tracy. So back to studio here. Really appreciate the support of Euronext. So, look, I want to thank Kirsten, who's in Italy. I want to thank Marcos in South Africa, and then obviously the panel here today in AIB headquarters in Moleswood Street. Thank you all for participating. And again, there's a lot of more work to be done in the coming months over Q4 to firmly establish the centre. Kirsten, you got a quick point you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to close it out with a wonderful demonstration. Ireland is, you've been talking about our global outreach. It's innate, Ireland taking up a global perspective. Ireland's deep demonstration on sustainable bioeconomy, which is being led by the Department of Agriculture, is actually one of those perfect examples of where a country is operating well beyond its own borders, influencing transformation inside, transformation of global value chains, and really laying in an example for others to follow. So here you have now the finance piece coming inside with a Centre of Excellence that really offers an opportunity to pull the whole system together and turn it into lifelong capabilities and global reach. And that's absolutely fantastic. I'm really proud to be part of it.
Great. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Marcos, Paul, Colin, Imelda, and then everybody who's down in Euronext, Darrell, the Minister, and Tracy, and the other colleagues. And again, what is also fantastic is to have the support of AIB, is to have the support of PTSB, Bank of Ireland, Irish Life Investment Managers, Mazars, Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, Davy, Goodbody, New Ireland, TD Securities, Maples Group, FD, and the ILDA Ireland, and obviously Skillnet Ireland and EU Climate Kick in supporting and co-funding alongside Skillnet Ireland the establishment of the centre. And as I said, Paul, under the guidance of the department, a lot more work to be done for Q4 and with the solid launch of the centre activities in 2023. So in January, that is. Thanks to everybody for staying in touch with us today, and thank you to the panel, and goodbye.
We are especially looking forward to the launch of the Sustainable Finance Centre of Excellence. It will play a central role in helping to drive standards in the sector and also continue to bring people together to develop research and talent and to share knowledge and collaboration on innovation and workable solutions.
The centre underpins much of the work which has been set out by the Sustainable Finance Roadmap, but also by international actors. So the Irish government, in collaboration with industry, working with the regulator, in partnership with the United Nations, has developed this fantastic concept which will underpin a huge amount of the work being done. It really has the ability not only to combine all of industry with a tangible meeting point, but it also allows us to action many of the items that come up at Climate Finance Week Ireland on each agenda, but to take also some of the best-in-class ideas globally and to bring them to the centre.
The centre will bring leaders in the sector together to collaborate in order to drive action and to drive the delivery of the roadmap in Ireland, which is the most significant and impactful way that we can ensure a just transition and the financing of that.
It's yet another further endorsement of Ireland's position, but Ireland's ambition in sustainable finance, where we're seeing more and more focus both internationally and domestically, more companies signing up to become involved in it, greater collaborations across both the public and private sector, and internationally, of course, through organisations like the EU and the UN. So we warmly welcome the establishment of the centre here in Ireland.
The Centre of Excellence provides strong evidence of Ireland's commitment to sustainable finance and also helps to strengthen the overall local ecosystem as well as our value proposition for inward investors.
No one's done this before, neither the vendors, the banks, the asset managers, the insurers, or the regulators. So collaboration is absolutely the key, and the Centre of Excellence becomes a beacon. And we've got to remember, this is not an Ireland-focused Centre of Excellence, this is an international one. And it's launched in Ireland because Ireland has that unique international financial services base. So that whatever we do in Ireland, we're going to export it everywhere. And that's what makes the Centre of Excellence so valuable.
For us, working together with industry peers and academia within the Sustainable Finance Centre of Excellence represents a unique opportunity to push the boundaries of current thinking and practices. This is our collective opportunity to develop a common narrative to support the sustainable finance agenda, drawing global best practices to our local market and organisations.
Well, I think for the finance community, it provides that cohesive centre point where we can benchmark the progress that we're making but it also helps me to understand how others are tackling some of the issues that we may be facing, and maybe to share some of the ways that we've tackled.
The Centre will lead on research and development activities aimed at supporting the design, development and launch of innovative financial solutions to facilitate the transition to a sustainable economy. The Sustainable Finance Centre provides an opportunity for member organisations to work together to develop meaningful financial solutions that will deliver a lasting impact.